Hello, NVIDIA creators. My name is James Tralie, and I'm a producer and animator at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And today I'm going to be talking you through some of the essential add-ons for Blender, both free built into Blender and also paid ones that I use on a daily basis for environment creation. A little bit about me: I'm a full-time producer and animator at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. I make animations and visualizations that communicate the science and achievements of our missions to you, the public, through creative videos. In my free time, I really love to relax and create these dreamscapes, is what I call them, in Blender, where I kind of combine a mix of the indoors and the outdoors to create a kind of a relaxing environment for you, the viewer. It's a really fun experience. It's a great way also for me to practice my 3D skills and also really have a lot of fun with Blender, which is a free program with just a ton of potential with it. A really great community is backing it and building it to make it what it is every single day. And there are always new features and add-ons added into Blender to explore. Today, I want to talk you through some of my favorite ones that I really recommend to you if you're trying to step up your game, or if you're just looking to improve and make something new. These add-ons will help you get to some amazing results in record time. To start off this tutorial, I wanted to talk about some free ones that are already built into Blender that you may or may not know about. And even if you do know about them, there's still some new features that I can kind of talk you through and explain. So if you're in Blender here, the way to enable add-ons is to go to Edit, then Preferences, and then you can click on this Add-ons tab right here. If you already know the add-ons name, you can just type it in the search bar, but if not, you can just scroll through here and there's quite a few add-ons that come already prepackaged with Blender. The first one I'm going to talk about is the ANT Landscape Add Mesh add-on. This is Blender's built-in environment creation add-on that really can quickly generate some procedural landscapes for you in just a couple clicks. So if I enable that add-on and then come back here into my viewport, let's just delete the default cube and the lamp here to free up some space in the middle. And I'm just going to go to Shift and then A, and then now under Mesh tab, you actually see the option to add in a landscape as well. So if I add a landscape mesh, you see we've got this default mesh added in here. Kind of annoying that it is hidden, but there's this little drop down here that you can click on to expand, and it has a ton of different presets that you can go through here and modify to really make this landscape exciting and unique. This is also kind of hidden in the menu here, but you've got this operator presets tab, and if I click on the drop down here, you see we've got a whole bunch of already prepackaged different types of landscapes that we can quickly add on here procedurally. So say, for example, I click on the canyon one, you can see it takes our landscape and makes it into a little canyon of sorts here. There's plenty of different ones to explore, and I encourage you to go through and just see which ones kind of stick out to you and work for the scene you're working on. And just a lot of different features. They've got a decent dunes one here as well too. And if you kind of want to go through and have a little bit more detail and control of these, you could go through and adjust the subdivisions on your surface. So right now we're just rocking 128 by 128, which is pretty low resolution here on the X and Y. So if I was to tab in edit mode here, you can see it's a pretty low poly mesh. And the one issue with what you just saw here when I added in this landscape is as soon as I click off of the preset tab and into this in edit mode, it gets rid of that. So it's kind of locked us into place with this landscape. So just keep that in mind, is that all changes are unfortunately final the minute you click off that tab and actually go in and start editing this landscape. So just add in this landscape again here, and then you can make adjustments to this as well. So you can adjust the subdivisions if you want. You can also adjust the mesh size a bit here, so we can crank this up if we want. And it just kind of procedurally creates this really interesting looking landscape. You can just add in different random seeds here, which kind of changes up the look of this based on different noise patterns. And what's really cool is you can adjust the noise that you're working on here as well. So you can add in different kinds of noise to see what different results you get. It's really quick to add in different features here, and you can get a lot of really interesting results with just a couple clicks. And so for this second add-on here, this is one that's also built into Blender as well too, and I used it pretty heavily in this scene that you see here on the right. I created sort of a Parisian apartment inspired design here with a lot of intricate details and little elements kind of hidden throughout the scene, like lamps, coffee cups, plants and watering cans, and all kinds of little details and stuff that I put all over here. It would take me a lot of time to model all of this out by hand, and they're pretty small details that really don't take up like a big piece of the image. You know, they're not big focal points of my render. So it's kind of a futile process to model all of those out by hand for a scene like this, where I really just want to focus on the overall environment creation. So again, we'll go over to Edit Preferences and Add-ons, and we're going to enable something called Blender Kit. So you'll see here the 3D View Blender Kit Online Asset Library. And when you enable that, you now have this new menu here where you've got a whole bunch of really awesome free, and also some paid ones too, models and materials and brushes that you can use for your scene. I like to sort by the free only ones, so you can get like a lot of different kinds of materials for your scene, or models as well too. So say for example, I'm looking for something in architecture. I could just click on this architecture tab here, and it'll take a second to load, and we've got a whole bunch of really awesome models that we can just scroll through here and really quickly import into our scene and use. Like I said, I use this quite a bit for adding in little details like this record player, a car, some of these vases, and little robot toy and a ukulele. Lots of really fun details that you can really add in quickly to the scene, and they really just make your scene look awesome. Now, just a bit of information about actually importing these in. There's actually two ways to import these into your scene, and I kind of defer back and forth between both of these depending on how I plan on using the object in my scene. The first way to import, if you go all the way down here, if this is hidden for you, just scroll through and allow this dropdown to come up here, and you'll see the import settings for your objects. You have an import method of linking, and then you have one for appending. So for example, if I was to link an object in here, let's just pick something kind of small here just to demo this. Let's pick this, let's see here. We can pick this, this vent, for example. So if I click on this vent here, just clicking on it once, it takes a second to access the model from online, and then it brings it into my scene. So now I actually have this vent. You can see it down here, kind of in the bottom of my scene. And if I click on this guy here, you'll notice that it is imported as a kind of a grouped collection here. So you see it's just kind of packaged everything in here. And while that's great, and it kind of keeps its stuff very easy to duplicate and move around, so if I want to make another one, I can just hit Alt-D and make a linked duplicate. You actually can't go in and edit this since it is just a grouped collection. You can't edit the materials. You see this is grayed out here. You also can't tab into edit mode to actually work with this model here. So if you're intending on bringing something in and actually kind of deforming it or changing the textures and whatnot, linking isn't your best strategy. Like I said, if I'm just trying to keep it simple and all to one collection, I'll use this approach. However, I often like to modify some of these models, change the color, change the orientation, kind of rig them up differently, move them around. So it's helpful for that purpose to use this second option here. So which is to append something. So if I click on append here, now let's bring in like a different model. Let's bring in, say for example, this chair here, this Maxime chair. And if I click on that, it takes a second to load as well. And what this will actually do is bring in the object as kind of all of its separate parts. So you can actually go through and modify it. Now you can see it's linked here in my scene as the Maxime chair. And actually I have access to the individual textures for this model as well too. So if I was to scale this guy up, and let's just kind of rotate this around into my scene a bit. So we've got this guy here. This is kind of all a weird orientation here, but we can kind of see what we can do here. So we've got this model selected, and if I wanted to, I can tab into edit mode, and I can actually model this and do different edits with this as well. If I want to go in sculpt mode and, add some kind of distortion to the seat covering, or use Blender's amazing cloth brush here to kind of simulate as if some creases or someone has sat down on this. You can do that while appending these models into your scene, which is really fun. And then you can also actually edit the textures too. And you can see this one comes with two different textures. You have a fabric one and a wood one. And sometimes I'm not always happy with the textures that come with this. So sometimes I'll bring in my own textures that I've made or that I got from somewhere else and kind of retexture the model and make it look a little bit more photorealistic or play around with it. And that's all well and good. And you can do that super simply by appending it into your scene. So this is a lot of fun to play around with. And again, there are hundreds, if not thousands of different models and textures in here to explore and use in your scene. So I highly encourage you to just take the time to go through here and see which ones you enjoy, which ones stick out to you, and have some fun playing around with them and putting them into your scene. All right, and the last free add-on that I wanted to talk about that's built into Blender is one that I just actually recently discovered and have had a ton of fun playing around with for various scenes, because you can really quickly create cool staircases, spiral staircases, normal staircases, and things with railings and stuff with just a couple clicks. And it's a lot of fun to do this and make your scene a little bit more interesting with some more details. You can just model staircases pretty easily in Blender in general just by creating an object and then making it an array and just kind of corkscrewing it around. However, I found that this is a little bit easier to do here, and it actually just involves just a few clicks to get to a really cool result. So you'll have to enable two add-ons for this guy. So you've got the ArchMesh add-on and the ArchIpack add-on. And this comes with a whole bunch of different things in addition to just staircases that you can use in your scene. To access this add-on, you want to go over to the Create tab, and you've got both the ArchMesh and the ArchIpack. And what I use quite a bit, and you can see I used it for this scene quite a bit, is the stair option. And we've got a whole bunch of different ones to choose from. I can just bring in this guy right here, which is just a normal staircase. And you see it kind of conveniently shows you the dimensions of this as well in meters, which is really helpful when you're trying to get something true to life and match a blueprint or something in your scene. And if you want to actually edit this, it's very simple again to do this. You can just go to this little drop down here that you see is kind of hidden, ArchIpack, and you can actually see all of the different details of this. You can change once again the stair style if you want. We've got this kind of curved L stair here, got a U stair here with kind of a little bit more curvature to it as well. You can do an O stair where it's kind of just going more vertically here. And you also have just a user-defined stair as well. So if you kind of want to mess around with this and have some fun, it's really easy to do so. And what I like about this is it does show you all these dimensions and stuff that you can play around with. And it's really easy when you're trying to modify this and add in different details to this in the preset tabs here. So you can change the width of your stairs, make it super wide if you wanted to. You can change the height as well to make it kind of more vertical in your scene as well. Thickness of this individual stairs themselves kind of adds something interesting here, as if this is kind of connected to the ground like cement or concrete or something here. You can change the offset of it as well. There's lots of really fun things to play around with. And once again, with any of these things, I don't want you to be following this just directly one-to-one. What I'm doing here, I encourage you to really dig into these add-ons and play around and see how they will work for your scenes. I think it's really helpful to just take the time and see what works and what doesn't work, and how you can actually use these add-ons to really advance your own workflow. In addition to just modifying all those details with the stairs, you can actually change the details of these handrails and stuff that you're seeing here as well. You can see there's these drop downs down here for the handrails that you can kind of change the altitude of. It's kind of disconnecting it there a bit, which looks a little funky. But you can also turn them off as well if you don't want them. So sometimes I just want just the stairs, and I'll just turn off the post and panels and everything. So we're just left with the stairs in our scene. And so this is a really fun way to very quickly add in some really nice stairs with some great details to them. And you can just, again, have some fun with this and see what you want to do. In addition to stairs, we also have a ton of window presets too. So you can bring in different windows into your scene as well, which already come pre-textured with different glass and window materials. So this works really well for very quickly adding a cool window to your scene. And just like what we had with the stairs, you also have these presets that you can do to modify the width of the window, the depth of these little window sills here, the height and everything. And you've got all of this really responsive in your viewport, and you can see the dimensions right there. So once again, as you're matching a blueprint, this is super simple and straightforward to do, and you get some really fantastic results. So have a lot of fun, play around with these, and see what you can create with just this one add-on here. Lots of really awesome stuff. So the amazing thing about Blender being such an open program is that there is such an incredible investment from the community in its development, both in terms of the software itself and also in terms of the add-ons that go along with it. There are a ton of incredible add-ons for Blender all across different parts of the web. You'll find them on Gumroad, you'll find them on Blender Market. There are so many really great ones. And today I want to walk you through a couple of the paid ones in addition to those free ones I just talked about that I think work wonders for my renders, really speed up my workflow and get some excellent results with just a couple clicks. I'm going to start by talking about a couple of the ones I use for nature assets to really quickly build out some of the scenes that you see here. I spent a lot of time designing the nature elements of my scenes to really make them a cohesive, beautiful part of my render. I want to make it so that it looks realistic, and in order to do this, I always go back to the source material, which is the great outdoors. There's no better reference than the real thing, and I always encourage you as an artist to go outside, take pictures and explore and see how light and shadow affect real objects. I often use nature as source material for a lot of my renders, so it's important to get those imperfections exactly right. So I'm going to start here by talking about a really fantastic add-on with a lot of potential for additional add-ons to be connected to it, and it is called Scatter. So this is an add-on that I got off the Blender Market, and what's really great about it is that you can really quickly add in some biomes to your scene. with just a couple clicks here. So I'll show you what I mean. So I've got this plane set up here, and I can just use this eyedropper tool to select this as my target object to scatter objects onto. What Scatter comes prepackaged with is this great biomes manager here, where you can open it up, and you see we already have a selection of a lot of really great particle systems that we can add into our scene. And you don't need to do any additional work here. All you need to do is just find one that you like, just click it, and it says execute this script. And what it's going to do on the back end is actually compile all of these particle systems, all the individual ones that you see here, the bushes, the grass, the rocks, leaves, etc., in the back end, and it's going to apply that to the object that you have selected using this kind of preset that it's set up here. And then what you can do is when it actually loads into your scene, sometimes it takes a little bit to load in here, but now you see it. Once it loads into your scene, you now see these all selectable as individual labeled layers that you can kind of toggle on and off if they're slowing down your viewport or your render. And you can actually go and select individual ones. So say I want this bush's rosemary here. I can select it by clicking there. And then I can actually adjust a lot of the particle settings right in this UI, which is fantastic. You can adjust the emission count, kind of turn it up and down here if you want to have more of these bushes. You can kind of change the seed so that you're randomizing the input of where they're going to be appearing on your object. You can change the scale right up in here. Sometimes I'll play around with this a bit, randomize it a bit too. And also just play around with the rotation as well too. You can have a lot of fun with this. I encourage you to really explore and see what you can do. And like I was just showing there are a ton of different biomes. So what I often find is really fun is just to explore which ones are out there and kind of combine some with each other. Sometimes maybe I don't always like some of the objects that come with it. Maybe I don't want these rocks in here or the gravel. I can just turn those off and then add something else instead in their place by just going right back up to that biomes manager and selecting one of these systems, or you can just scatter a specific layer. So we've got a whole bunch of these really great assets to choose from, anything from, you know, flowers and weeds and stuff to bushes and trees and ferns and rocks, all kinds of really great stuff that you can scatter with just a couple of clicks onto your scene and then play around with. Additionally, what I also like about this UI is that it's really simple to add in masks to your scene to control exactly where the layer is going to be affected on your scene. So let's actually work on this rock plane thorn that you see right here, this layer there. So what I can go do is go down to this section here where you see masks and create a new mask. And I often use the paint layer mask, which I think works really, really well for most scenarios here. I just add a paint layer, and let's just click on this drop down here. Then with this group selected here, so I've got the rock planes thorns selected, let's also add in a rock plane creeper to this as well. We'll affect both of these at the same time. You can hit add influence to selected systems, and initially nothing happens. But what we can now do is click on this paint mode to start painting exactly where we want these assets to appear in our scene. So if I'm painting in here, right now I'm kind of creating like a little path or a trail of sorts. So wherever it's really deep red here, there are no particles of this specific system that will show up there. So we can really quickly create really cool paths and kind of affect the placement of our objects in our scene, which I always think is really fun to do and kind of play around with and really make a fun looking nature scene. I do this pretty often to kind of guide the viewer's eye through the scene. I often like to make little paths or little places where you're kind of flowing through the natural elements of the scene. It's really simple and easy to do this, and I love just kind of experimenting around and just playing around with these for a really long time. What's also great about Scatter is that they have an incredible opportunity for expansion packs to add onto here as well. So if I go into my Biomes Manager, I've actually purchased a couple of these, and one that I use quite a bit is this Junglescapes one from a company called Terrascapes that integrates directly into the Scatter ecosystem. And what you can do now here is have a selection of a whole bunch of different tropical assets here. So we've got all kinds of little tropical plants, palm trees, etc., that work really, really well in a lot of my scenes as well. I like to make these kind of vacation, tropical beach vibes type scenes as well. So I'll play around a lot with these assets to get some really great results. And they work just the same as any of these Scatter assets from before, where you can just click to execute the script, pop them into your scene. So now we've got these cool little plants here. You can see they have a pre-named system here as well. And I can go through and actually play around with these as well too. So if I wanted to increase the number of them there, it's super easy to do that. And I can increase or decrease their scale, randomize that a bit. All the same exact effects. I can even add this to that paint system that I just made before. And bam, now we have them added into that path as well. And this is all super simple to do. And I just love playing around with this, like I said. What's also really cool about this is you can add in some procedural noise to your terrain. So let me just turn off all these systems here so you see what I'm talking about. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom, 4 is getting the imperfections right in a nature scene. It's super easy to make something that's really pristine and perfect edges in 3D, because that's just how by default 3D is. When you add in an object, it's got these really sharp, clean edges. It's perfectly flat. There is really no, nature plane out there that is completely flat. If you look close up at the ground, there's all kinds of little bumps and divots and ridges and things. And it's really, by default, not showing that, when you add in a plane, obviously. So what's great about scatter is you have a couple options for procedural noise, or you can just do an image-based one as well too and load up an image that you have of a displacement map. I often use this procedural noise 1, which gives me some kind of subtle little bumps that I can modify up a little bit. Let's shade this smooth. This surface here I'll shade smooth. And you can kind of change the scaling of it too, so it's not as crazy. And then if I wanted to modify this a bit more, I can always go into sculpt mode and kind of pull different edges up here, add in like little hills and things. And so very quickly, you've got some kind of imperfections here, and this is looking a lot more natural. And if I start adding in some of my objects back into the scene, you see that they scatter perfectly across that new ridged surface. And this looks just so much more natural with just a couple clicks here. So this is all baked into the scatter ecosystem.